Hello and welcome to another episode of Despite the Challenges, a show where we showcase amazing abilities of people who have overcome many impeding circumstances in their lives. They just don't stop there. They go help in community in many amazing ways and make us all proud. Today I have a guest representing an organization from Princeton and Morristown area. The organization is called Good Grief, and they help young people, young adults to cope with a loss of loved one or someone that they were very close to. And there's so many things this organization is doing for people they serve. Let's hear more directly from Jesse Bassett. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right, just tell us a little bit about yourself and organization, Good Grief.
So I am the program director for Good Grief in Princeton. As you said, we have two locations, both in Princeton and in Morristown, New Jersey. And we are a nonprofit organization, and we provide unlimited and free support services to children, teens, young adults, and their families after they've experienced the death of a mom, dad, brother, or sister. And we do that through our peer support programs, education, and advocacy.
Education and advocacy.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about how did this organization come about and how long they had been serving the local communities.
So Good Grief started in 2004 by a group of local community members comprised of working professionals and parents and a number of just different people who got together and started noticing that there was really a need for support services for children who were grieving. And so they started talking about, creating this nonprofit organization that would address this need in the communities. So they brought in some professionals and had what's called a feature search conference over a weekend and started casting a vision for what this organization could look like. And in 2004, Good Grief was born, and we first started really as an organization that did mainly education and advocacy work. So working with professionals in schools and other local organizations to provide them with education on how to support grieving kids in their schools, in places like churches and other religious institutions, things like that. So mainly doing the advocacy and education work. And then the need became really significant, and people started coming to Good Grief and asking, can we get direct services and direct help?
Oh, I see. One example of direct service would be?
Would be peer support programs. And that really now is the heart of what we do. So 2007, Good Grief started providing that direct peer support services. So families can come to Good Grief and they can enroll in our programs, and they would come in on a bi-weekly basis, so every other week. And they would come in and have a meal at Good Grief. We provide them with pizza because kids love pizza, right?
And it's universal. You can't go wrong
exactly.
with
it. And then we have them go into age-specific groups, starting as young as 3 years old.
Oh, really?
Yep. And so we would have a 3 to 5-year-old group, 2nd through 4th graders, the middle school age group, high school, young adults, and adult groups. And we have those specific groups for them to go into and do that work of peer support. So they support one another. We have planned activities for them. And it's just an opportunity for them to just get that more direct peer support services from us.
And interact with someone else who have lost.
Exactly. And that's what it really is all about, that interaction with their peers.
So it's phenomenal. And I know that sometimes the common reaction is you only know how much pain and suffering or the hurt is there unless you walk into their shoes.
Yeah.
Right. So for them at a so tender age,
Yes.
to interact with someone of who has lost, and I think there must be a common bond among them.
Yes, definitely. We say that really at the heart of everything we do is the power of human connection.
Yes. Yes.
And that human connection comes from shared life experience, from one individual being able to empathize with another individual because you can imagine what it's like for me, as you said, to walk in my shoes.
Yes.
And so we get kids together who are of the same age, who have had similar life experiences. They have lost someone that they love, and they are able to interact with one another, to engage in sharing memories and experiences, things they struggle with.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And all kinds of different things, but also, and importantly, play together.
Play together.
So Good Grief really is a joyful place, as much as it is a place where loss and grief is shared, also new life and hope, finding meaning and purpose, and again, important and valuable relationships in their lives.
So, if I put this correctly, when they come in a place and interact with someone else who have lost a near and a dear one, regardless of their age, they are preschooler, kindergartner, or 6-7-year-old, they are adapting to the loss by interacting with someone with a similar experience, but which I find is unique is that accepting that and seeing hope.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world for them.
Yeah, exactly. We call kind of this point in their lives coping with this new reality or this new normal.
Okay.
So when a young person experiences the death of somebody that they love, that really is a traumatic experience for them.
For anybody.
For anybody, exactly. But we call kids kind of the forgotten mourners. And oftentimes children are forgotten in this process as, well, maybe they don't remember, or maybe they don't really understand what's going on fully, or they don't seem to be grieving in the same way as an adult would. They don't externalize it in the same way. And yet, like, kids really do grieve and mourn. And so we're providing them with a space to have safety, to have peers that they can share those things with and have that connection and shared understanding, so that they have that safe space to share those feelings and emotions. And that is part of the work we do, is helping them to begin to develop those skills to externalize and express their grief. Exactly. Because part of that coping process that you're talking about is being able to express grief.
Yes.
To do work like self-advocate for themselves, to sort of share their feelings and also the things that they need from other people. So we help them with that process.
Communicating that, being open to.
Exactly.
I think that is a key for a lot of people. Communication can be a challenge, especially sharing something that they are feeling hurt about.
Yes.
And so your organization looks at grief or a loss or death as more of a healthy response to handling those situations. And I think we need more of it, because sometimes the expression or acceptance of the loss that good grief is helping them with, later in life they may have other situations that can cause hurt and grief. So expression helps them.
Yes.
Building their personality.
Definitely. Our organization is called Good Grief for a reason, right? The name kind of lets you know some of our core philosophical beliefs as an organization, and that is that grief is a normal and even healthy reaction to death and loss. Our bodies are literally going through a physical adaptation and change as this occurs to us. So kids at a young age, when this happens to them, and people of every age, we have this reaction and we are trying to learn how to cope with that. And that happens differently throughout the developmental stages. And
with different personalities.
Exactly. And so it's just a question of how do we learn to cope with that and adapt to this change that has occurred in our life, this new normal, this new reality that we're facing.
I see. Could you share with our audience any example that you see something transforms after children become used to communicating their grief or their hurt or their loss in very positive ways?
So a specific example of, for instance, a child in our program, something like that? Yeah. So we have a number of different examples because we get so much feedback from our families about the transformation and change that takes place. And that's an important part of the work we do, is to capture those stories and to tell them. I'm thinking of one teenager that we had recently who shared with us that before they came to Good Grief, they were just trying to get by. Really. And there wasn't a space that they felt that they were able to really share, or even maybe not know how to share, or have that safe environment in which to be guided through that process of learning how to cope, to communicate their feelings, and to understand how to function and live within this new reality that they're living in without this person that they love to is now gone. And he expressed to us that not only was he able to sense the change that happened within him when he came to Good Grief, and he experienced our programs, and he began to develop coping skills and be able to self-advocate and do all these different things. But he also could recognize it in his sibling and in his mother.
Oh, I see.
So I think that's an incredibly powerful thing. And he's a teenager. For him to be able to not only see the change within himself, but also to look outside of himself and look at his sister and say, she's communicating more than she used to.
So
she's
kind
opening
of
up in a whole new way. My mom, I can just see that she is so much more full of like joy and life, and we're finding purpose and meaning and a new identity for us as a family.
So it's a ripple effect.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly.
So on an average, how long each individual would stay with your programs on an average?
Yeah, so it's unique for every person. On average, individuals come anywhere from 18 months to 3 years.
Okay.
Some stay for shorter periods of time, some stay for longer. We leave that open to them. So when they come through, we let them know about our programs, what they can expect from us, the services that we offer, and we say you can stay for as long as you want. And it's always free for as long as you want to come. So I think that's one of the really amazing things about Good Grief, is that we do offer these incredible programs that have great activities, and you build these meaningful relationships, and
a safe environment.
All these different things. And on top of that, it's always free for as long as they want to be there.
Are there any medical professionals involved with the education or advocacy?
So this is a question that we get asked frequently, whether or not we're a clinical organization, and we're not clinical because we don't pathologize grief. So that's an important thing that we talk about, and that's part of Good Grief, that grief is a normal reaction to death and loss. And so,
which is also, death is also a natural part of life.
Exactly. So we don't pathologize it. So we don't, 90% of grieving kids, when they experience death and grief, if they are given the proper support and care and have a healthy family environment in which communication takes place, where feelings and needs are shared, where they find the support and care that they need, 90% of those kids, studies have shown, will go on to lead healthy and happy and normal lives.
Yes.
Now, there is that 10% window, and we do recognize that not everyone is the same, and some people are in need of additional help through maybe therapy or something like that. And so we do have resources that we refer families to in the community, but we also believe that the majority of kids who might come through our program is, we're helping them to rebuild their lives and create that supportive and caring environment, and they all fall into that 90% window where they can go on to live happy, normal, productive lives.
I want to bring you back a little bit to a study that I think there's quite a few studies out there, that one from Center on Developing Child at Harvard that points out that cortisol disrupts the developing brain circuits when toxic stress occur in children.
Yes.
And grieving is toxic.
Yes.
It can be, it could be. I think when there is a loss of a family member, it kind of disrupts. So I'm going to use just in a scenario, if the breadwinner of the household passes away, and it's a big disruption on a family, not only emotional, financial, and it can be very chaotic to manage, right? So tell us a little bit more about how in your experiences or with Good Grief, collectively, that what they have seen over the years, children who are able to benefit from your programs can defy these types of studies, because there are negative effects.
Definitely. So I think that study is an incredibly important study, and really helped us to point to the biology of the work that we're doing. And so we can talk about how relationships are important, and we can all, relate to that in some way, that relationships form and shape who we are, and that helps us to become the persons, who we become.
Who we become.
Exactly. Now, this study helps us to point to what actually is happening in the brain. So when a child experiences this traumatic experience of death, grief, cortisol is released in the brain, and the developing brain is actually challenged in certain ways. And so different challenges will be faced by that child due to toxic stress. So they labeled toxic stress as stress which is unsupported, that goes without proper support and care and things like that. And so there are countless children who come to Good Grief prior not having had a supportive and caring environment in which communication is healthy, in which they can express their feelings and their needs. And then, there are just countless stories of kids who then, and their families, come into Good Grief and learn, the tools and the skills to cope with their grief, to communicate healthfully, to self-advocate. And literally that study tells us then that not only does toxic stress change, it completely is reversed as well and becomes tolerable stress.
This can lead to, I'm talking about the toxic stress and the cortisol, there are a lot of physical impact, can lead to some disease, etc.
There are a number of risk factors, heart disease, depression, diabetes. Yes, there are a number of different risk factors. But again, the important thing to point out, I think, is that if the only change that needs to happen is a supportive and caring environment, that can be a very challenging thing, but Good Grief helps provide that. And not only within our four walls, but we also provide education and advocacy in the community, so that we can work toward a day in which we all know how to support and care for grieving kids and their families when death occurs, which it's inevitable, right? It's going to occur.
Yes.
And so it's about how do we help people walk through that experience? How do we come alongside them and support them, care for them, give them that environment in which toxic stress becomes tolerable stress.
Tolerable stress.
In which those health risk factors are no longer.
Stress is part of life,
yes.
right? As adults as well.
Definitely.
It's different levels of stress, and having that ability and opportunity to deal with it, it's kind of helps them to get a good start on dealing with issues, critical issues in life. So I see that it's such an admirable work that your organization is doing. And would like to know a little bit more about the benefits children had, and they had moved on, and do they come back in any way to support others?
Yeah, so this is actually a really important thing that we're working on. We're putting together we see it as a very important part of your Good Grief experience, that not only do you come and you can receive these free services and programs and be a part of this wonderful community, because it really is a community of people who are caring and supporting for one another, but also when you decide that you don't need the services of Good Grief anymore and you're ready to move on, that you recognize the importance of giving back, paying it forward. And that's an incredibly important part of what we do. And we do have families do that. We have this wonderful group of people called our Family Advisory Board, and they're comprised of adults who have been a part of our programs and are now a part of this board that helps us to develop our programs, to write letters to our families, to make phone calls, who are just an incredibly important part of what we do. And they're paying it forward. And we have kids who are doing that as well, whether it's in different social service projects in the communities that they live in, or you know, raising grief awareness in their schools, different things like that. In schools
as well.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think it's innovative too, because in many situations people may not know someone going through some personal situation. So bringing awareness into schools or other, you know, places of worship and in community is pretty good. And I think giving back in that process is a healing, continued healing for them too, right?
Definitely.
So it's something, some scars don't go away, right?
Yes.
But finding ways to give back to communities, again, I think is in a healing process somewhere.
I think so. I think it's just part of that process, again, as you said, of healing. When you come into a place like Good Grief and you just have incredible need for support, to then go through this huge transition and change in your life, and to come out on the other side and be able to then ask, how can I support someone else now? I think that's an incredible thing that happens. Yeah.
It is. Tell us a little bit about where you find certain situations that a young person may have very difficult time accepting someone else in their lives because they have lost some close. I'm sure there must be some situations. So what kind of programs or support is available to them?
Accepting another person in their life.
to be able to give them any kind of support, or just if they kind of shut themselves to outside world. And I'm sure that happens. And I just want to make sure that if our viewers who are watching this program, and if they have any questions, so they can, you know, reach out to your organization, and we will give you the website and contact information. But just wanted to kind of get the other side when you don't see sometime as positive results coming out as early as many others children might find it, you know, with the shared experiences. So.
You know, I think everyone's experience and grief is unique, and so because of that, certainly we have a number of different experiences of individuals who come into Good Grief, and everyone's story is different. And regardless of that, we believe that we do have a program that, for most people who come through our doors, find that it is incredibly healing and something that provides them with that foundation to go on and live the rest of their lives within this new normal, this new reality that they're living in. And so, yeah, I think that regardless of that, you know, lack of acceptance of, you know, whatever, that an important part of that is to just lift up that we honor the uniqueness of everyone's grief, right? And because of that, I think that it is a place where people, regardless of where they are at, can find hope and healing and things like that.
For some people, it might take longer, and it's an ongoing process for some.
Yes. Definitely. We don't put a time frame on grief. So famously, there's an individual who developed these stages of grief.
Yes.
Which
would you like to share something? Yes, please do.
So her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she actually developed these stages of grief for people who were dying. So it was actually originally published it was in a book called On Death and Dying, and the 5 stages were about people who were, first accepting the reality of their own mortality. So the stages represent that person going through this process of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Interestingly, these have transferred over into our cultural thinking of how we think about death and grief. Now, we assume that everyone is going to go through these 5 stages in some way. Well, first you're going to deny that this person has died, then you're going to have anger, then you're going to have isolation, depression, all these different things. And we often think that it should be a linear process, that you should travel through this in a linear way. But what we find is that that isn't the case at all. And that's because everyone's grief is unique.
And depends on the closeness of the relationship that they have lost.
Certainly.
And it could be pet, and impact on a child might be as strong than for a 10-year-old experiencing a parent or some.
There are so many factors that go into it. Age, gender, race and ethnicity, where they live. There are just countless factors that play into an individual's experience of death and grief. And so because of that, we want to lift up the uniqueness of everyone's grief. And we want to honor that and allow everyone to have the space and safety to share their own experiences and don't have an expectation for, as we talked about, a timeline. Or an expectation of, well, it's been 6 months now, aren't you over it? Like, isn't it time that you move on? We don't have that expectation at Good Grief.
No, I think your organization, the services that you are providing is so much needed in a community, and it just gives them in a healthy way to not only express, share, but be prepared for more stressful situations to face in life.
Yeah, because they will always come up, won't they?
Yes. I just wanted to add that losing someone by death is grief, but a relationship breaks apart, that's also grief.
Definitely.
Right?
And
even though people are alive,
and
but
we recognize that.
Kind of,
there are many different forms of grief. So many people ask us, do you take people in your organization who maybe, there's a relationship that's been broken, whether it was a long-term relationship or divorce, or they moved, or a pet died or something. And we recognize there are many different kinds of grief. Our organization caters specifically to childhood bereavement, so kids who have experienced the death of a parent or a sibling. However, that doesn't mean that we don't recognize that there are other kinds of grief.
Because the anger and the denial, the whole processes are the same.
Questions we get often is, how in the world are your programs free? And I'll tell you, it's because we have such a wonderful community of individuals who are so passionate about what we're doing that everybody from volunteers to board members to donors across the board just give so much to this organization, and we're growing quickly, and so we're always in need of more support, more volunteers, individuals who want to come and give in whatever way they can. And the hands and feet of our organization are our volunteers, and that's really how it's possible. All of our peer support groups are run by volunteer facilitators. And they're individuals who come from a diversity of backgrounds, whether it's teachers or professionals in all different fields, finance, healthcare, many different things. They can come in and they go through a 36-hour training program. And do an application, and they run our support groups. So they're a huge part of what we do. And you have workshops also. We have workshops in communities that we give, so especially in schools, if any schools or professional organizations are interested in having us come in and do trainings, we do workshops as well. So lots of different ways that people can get involved. I am sure that you viewers who are watching our show would be interested in, and we'll provide the website, and they can contact your organization for either volunteering or donating their time. And this is all the time we had today. I thank you so much, Jesse, for being here and sharing about your organization. And I just want to share some thoughts with my viewers.
A quote that I came across is, "It's hard to forget someone who gave you so much to remember." So grieving is not an easy process. So it takes a lot.
Definitely.
So once again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And until next time, I am host Ritu Chopra. Thank you for joining us.